Hello there. Welcome to Danny Night Stories. I'm here to help you relax whether you are sleeping or just want to rest. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Now, relax and enjoy. Minecraft horror story, The Cave Dweller, Beneath Steve's Village. Chapter 1, The Eyes in the Mine. Steve left Lantern Vale through the northern gate shortly before midday. The sky was clear. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he climbed, and the village grew smaller behind him until its lantern posts looked like short black lines beside the river. At the mine entrance he stopped to look back once. Everything was exactly where it belonged. Steve placed a torch inside the entrance, adjusted the pickaxe on his shoulder, and began descending the familiar stone staircase. Steve had been underground for 11 minutes when the first torch went out. It was not broken. Nothing struck it. There was no splash of water, no falling gravel, and no hiss from a nearby lava pocket. One moment the torch burned on the deep slate wall behind him. The next, its flame folded inward and vanished, leaving a black stick fixed to the stone. Steve stopped mining. His diamond pickaxe remained raised beside a half-finished vein of redstone. The cave around him was narrow and quiet, descending in crooked shelves toward the bottom of the world. He could hear lava somewhere below. He could hear a zombie groaning behind a sealed wall. He could hear his own boots scrape whenever he shifted his weight. Then he heard another pair of boots scrape farther up the tunnel. Steve turned. The passage behind him was empty. 4 torches marked the route back to the staircase he had carved from the mountain, each flame spaced 8 blocks apart. The dead torch was the closest. Beyond it, the tunnel bent sharply and disappeared. He waited until the zombie groaned again. The sound came from his left. The scrape had come from behind. Steve removed the dark torch and placed a fresh one. For half a second the flame illuminated 2 white squares at the bend in the tunnel. They were too high to belong to a skeleton, too close together to be glow-lichen. They hung nearly 3 blocks above the floor, perfectly still, with the vague outline of a head around them. Beneath the eyes was a body so thin that the torchlight seemed to pass through it. Steve reached for his sword. The white eyes disappeared. He ran to the bend. Nothing waited there. The stairway was clear all the way to the cobblestone landing at Y level, -12. No particles drifted in the air. No mob retreated into the dark. There was only a patch of polished, deep slate where Steve was certain he had left rough stone and 5 long scratches cut into it at the height of his face. The first sighting? For 187 Minecraft days, Steve and Alex had lived in a valley beneath a snow-capped mountain. They had arrived with wooden tools and no food. By the end of their first week, they had a wheat field, 2 beds, and a fence that kept most of the night outside. By the end of their first month, the fence had become a stone wall. The wall became a village. The village became Lantern Vale, named for the rows of lanterns Alex hung from every roof and path. Nothing in the valley stayed dark for long. Their main house stood beside a river, built from spruce logs and deep slate tiles. An iron golem patrolled the gate. Wolves slept beneath the kitchen windows. Villagers crossed the square each morning, muttering on their way to farms, looms, and smithing tables. At night, Steve could stand on the watchtower and count more than 200 lights. The mountain to the north had supplied nearly everything: coal near the entrance, iron lower down, diamonds beneath the layers of deep slate. Steve had spent dozens of days opening staircases, bridges, and branch mines through its interior. He knew the sound of every common mob. He knew when stone concealed water, and when deep slate concealed lava. He knew how darkness behaved. Darkness did not usually watch him. Steve returned to Lantern Vale before sunset, with 32 redstone dust, 6 diamonds, and the dead torch. Alex was repairing a redstone gate beside the western wall when she saw him cross the bridge. "You came back early," she said. Steve placed the torch on the grass between them. This went out. Alex glanced at it. "Torches do not go out." "I know." Then it broke. It stayed on the wall. That made her stop. Alex knew the game as well as Steve did. She picked up the torch, turned it in her hand, and placed it against the outer wall of the gatehouse. It lit normally. Steve described the eyes. He described the translucent body, the height, and the scratches on the polished deep slate. Alex listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked past him, toward the mountain. "Enderman?" she asked. "Too thin." "Herobrine?" Steve looked at her. Alex gave a small shrug. "I had to ask." They agreed to seal the lower staircase until morning. Steve placed an iron door across the mine entrance and connected it to a lever on the outside. Alex added 2 blocks of obsidian behind it. Neither said what both were thinking. An iron door could stop a zombie. Obsidian could stop almost anything that broke blocks. But the figure in the tunnel had not needed to break the torch. It had simply taken the light away. That night, Steve woke to the sound of stone being mined beneath the house. 1 strike, a pause, 2 more strikes. He sat up. Alex was already awake in the bed across the room, holding an iron axe. The wolves beneath the window were standing, their heads angled toward the floor. The mining sound moved from beneath Steve's bed to beneath Alex's. Then it stopped. At sunrise, they tore up the floor. There was solid dirt underneath, no tunnel, no cave, no missing block. Only a torch lying on its side in the soil. Its tip was black. The second miner. Alex refused to let Steve return to the mountain alone. She filled 2 shulker boxes with supplies, torches, ladders, arrows, blocks of wool, cooked beef, water buckets, a spare shield, and enough cobblestone to seal a tunnel from floor to ceiling. Steve sharpened both diamond swords and repaired their armor at the anvil. Before leaving, Alex built a simple redstone alarm at the mine entrance. Any creature crossing the tripwire would ring a bell in the gatehouse. They entered shortly after midday. The obsidian blocks were still in place. The iron door was still locked. Yet the fresh torch Steve had placed outside the entrance was dark. Alex tried to relight it by breaking and replacing it. The flame returned. "Show me where you saw it," she said. They descended through stone, then through deep slate. Steve had marked the route with signs showing the depth and direction of each branch. At Y level, -46, they reached the redstone vein. Every torch was burning. The scratches on the polished deep slate were gone. Alex ran her hand over the wall. "You said they were here." They were. Someone replaced the block. There is no one else in the world. The sentence sounded less certain underground. They searched the nearby branches. 20 blocks east of Steve's tunnel, Alex found an opening neither of them remembered digging. It was 1 block high and 1 block wide, cut straight through solid deep slate. Steve crouched and aimed a torch inside. The shaft continued beyond the light, descending 1 block at a time, like a staircase made for something that travelled on its stomach. At the mouth lay a piece of rotten flesh. Alex placed a wool block over the opening. They moved on. 5 minutes later they found the same 1 block shaft on the opposite side of the mine. The wool was gone. Steve checked his coordinates. The first opening had been east of the redstone branch. This one was west, more than 60 blocks away. Yet when Alex placed her ear beside it, she could hear the faint ringing of the alarm bell at the surface. Something had crossed the tripwire. They ran for the staircase. The bell rang again, then a third time. It should have been impossible to hear through so much stone, but every chime arrived clearly, as if the bell were following several blocks behind them. At Y level -20, Alex stopped so suddenly that Steve struck her shield. "Do not move," she whispered. Ahead of them, just beyond the last torch, a tall shape leaned around the stone corner. Only half of it was visible. A narrow head, 1 long shoulder, an arm hanging nearly to the floor. Its skin was sickly and pale, but the edges of its body were translucent, wavering against the wall behind it. 2 white eyes stared at Alex without blinking. Steve slowly raised his bow. The creature faded before he released the string. Its eyes remained for a moment after the body had vanished. Then they went out. Alex did not speak again until they reached daylight. The redstone alarm was intact. No footprints surrounded the tripwire. Inside the gatehouse, however, the bell was still moving. Chapter 2. Jory's Warning. The name in the book. They closed the mountain for 6 days. Steve mined iron from a ravine south of the village instead. Alex doubled the lanterns on the northern wall and built observers facing the mine entrance. Nothing emerged. No creature crossed the snow. No unexplained sounds came from beneath the house. On the 7th morning, a villager found a book on the lectern inside the library. It had not been there the night before. The cover was unmarked. Most pages were empty. On the first page, someone had written 3 lines. It watches while it is pale. It waits when it becomes solid. It hunts when the lights go out. The writing was uneven, slanting lower across the page, as if the author had been moving. A name appeared on the final page. Jory. Neither Steve nor Alex knew anyone called Jory. They searched every chest in the village for other books. In a barrel beneath the cartographer's table, they found a map of the mountain drawn on old paper. Steve's tunnels were marked in blue. A second network, much deeper and far older, was marked in black. It formed a knot beneath the north face of the mountain, centered on a square at Y level, -58. Beside the square, Jory had written one word: dwelling. Alex turned the map toward the window. In daylight, another line became visible beneath the ink. Do not teach it the way home. The abandoned camp. Steve wanted to burn the map and keep the mountain sealed. Alex argued that the book had appeared inside a locked library. Whatever watched the caves already knew where they lived. Waiting would only give it time to learn more. They decided to locate Jory's camp, not the dwelling. The map showed an abandoned mine shaft intersecting Steve's lowest branch. If Jory had survived long enough to study the creature, he might have left tools, armor, or instructions behind. They returned at dawn with a tamed wolf named Flint. The wolf had followed Steve since their 12th day in the valley and had never refused a cave. This time, Flint planted his paws at the mine entrance and whined. Steve fed him meat. The wolf backed away. They left him in the gatehouse. The mine shaft began behind a wall Steve had passed hundreds of times. On Jory's map, a tunnel continued north. In Steve's mine, there was only deep slate. Alex struck the wall with her pickaxe and broke through after 2 blocks. Stale air moved out of the darkness. Oak supports emerged in the torchlight. Cobwebs covered rails that descended into a cavern. The place looked ordinary until they noticed the torches. Hundreds lined the supports, the floor, and even the ceiling. Some were separated by only a single block. Everyone was burnt black. Alex placed a new torch. The flame appeared small and blue. They followed the rails. Cave spider spawners sat broken inside their cages. Minecart chests had been emptied. At the end of the track, they found a room built from iron blocks with a piston door and a lever on the inside. Deep scratches covered the outer walls. The piston still worked. Inside were a bed, a crafting table, 9 empty coal chests, and a row of signs. The first sign read, Day 4. It only looks. The second read, Day 9. It moves when I mine. The third read, Day 17. Water does nothing. The fourth read, Day 23. It can crawl. The fifth had been broken in half. The remaining words said, Surface safe. The final sign was fixed beside a hole in the ceiling. The opening was 1 block wide. Day 31. I was wrong. Jory's chest contained a cracked compass, 3 raw pork chops, and another book. The early pages described distant sightings, always after cave sounds. A pale figure would stand at the far edge of the light and disappear if Jory approached. Later, Entries described it becoming solid. When that happened, it would appear close behind him and remain still as long as he watched it. The last complete entry was shorter. It does not fear the surface. It chooses not to follow. Every escape makes it angrier. I have used the sun 3 times. There will not be a 4th. Something tapped the iron wall behind Steve. Once, twice. Then all the torches in the mine shaft went out together. The standoff. Alex reignited the torch in her hand. Its light filled the iron room. The cave dweller was standing behind Steve. This time it was not translucent. Its body was solid and horribly thin, almost 3 blocks tall, even with its head bent beneath the ceiling. Long arms reached below its knees. Yellow claws rested against the iron floor. Its mouth stretched across most of its face, crowded with square, uneven teeth. Above them, the white eyes shone without reflecting the torch. Steve felt its breath against the back of his helmet. Alex had her bow raised, but she did not fire. The book lay open at her feet. "Keep looking at it," she said. Steve turned 1 step at a time. The creature did not move. Its head followed him with a slow, broken tilt. There was less than 1 block between them. Alex edged toward the piston lever. The dweller's eyes remained fixed on Steve. "When I open the door, walk backward," she said. The piston retracted. Darkness waited outside. Steve backed through the doorway. The creature bent lower, but remained inside. Alex followed, keeping her torch aimed at its face. For 10 blocks, they retreated along the rails while watching it. Then Alex's heel caught on a raised track. She looked down. The cave dweller crossed the distance before Steve could shout. It did not run like a zombie or teleport like an Enderman. It unfolded. Its arms struck the floor. Its body dropped forward, and it launched through the piston door on all 4s. The movement was so fast that the torchlight blurred across its teeth. Steve raised his shield. The impact threw him against an oak support and removed 4 hearts. Alex fired an arrow into the creature's shoulder. It barely reacted. It climbed the wooden pillar, crossed the ceiling upside down, and dropped between them. Alex ran north. Steve ran south. The cave dweller chose Steve, the first chase. Steve sprinted along the rails as torches died ahead of him. The creature was not extinguishing lights behind the chase. It was taking away the lights he had not reached yet, turning the path into darkness 1 section at a time. He heard claws scrape the ceiling. When he looked back, the dweller was crawling above him, with its limbs spread across the tunnel, head twisted downward, white eyes level with his own. Steve fired an arrow. The creature released the ceiling and landed behind him. He placed cobblestone without slowing, filling the passage with a wall 3 blocks thick. The scraping stopped. For 2 seconds the mine was silent. Then 1 pale hand pushed through a gap, no larger than a missing rail. The dweller flattened its head sideways and pulled the rest of its body through the 1 block opening. Bones bent beneath its skin with a sequence of dry clicks. The wall had delayed it by less than 5 seconds. Steve reached the branch mine and turned toward the staircase. The dweller followed through every corner. It climbed vertical drops. It crawled under half slabs. It crossed a lava bridge by gripping the walls above it. Wherever Steve could fit, it found a way to fit. At Y level -12, Steve poured his water bucket down the staircase. The current carried him upward. He expected the creature to be pushed back. The cave dweller entered the water without slowing. Its white eyes moved beneath the blue current. Its arms reached from step to step while the flow passed through its narrow body. Steve abandoned the bucket and climbed. Alex appeared above him at the final landing. She had reached another route and was holding the lever to the iron door. "Move!" she shouted. Steve crossed the threshold. Alex slammed the door and triggered the pistons. Obsidian sealed the entrance behind them. The creature struck once from the other side. The obsidian did not break. It struck again. A crack appeared across the iron door. They ran into daylight. The third blow never came. At the edge of the snow, the cave dweller stopped. Its head and shoulders emerged from the mine, solid against the darkness, but it refused to cross the line of sunlight. It watched Steve and Alex descend the mountain until distance hid the village below. Then it slowly raised one arm and pointed after them. The false safety. For 9 days nothing happened. The creature remained underground. Steve and Alex repaired their armor and closed the northern gate. They warned the villagers away from the mountain, although the villagers seemed to understand before being told. No one walked north. The iron golem stood facing the mine for hours at a time. Steve began to believe Jory's warning had been exaggerated. The surface was safe if they stayed on it. Lantern Vale had food, walls, beds, and enough iron to last for years. Diamonds no longer mattered. On the 10th night, every lantern in the village went out. There were no sounds. One by one, orange squares vanished from the streets. The western farms disappeared first, then the bridge, then the roofs around the square. Darkness moved toward the main house in a perfect circle. Steve and Alex stood at an upstairs window with their weapons drawn. When the last lantern beneath them died, moonlight showed a shape standing beside the village well. It was tall. It was pale. It was watching the house. Steve blinked, and the shape became an oak fence post. They searched until sunrise. No footprints marked the paths. No doors were open. The redstone gate had never activated. Beside the well, Alex found a torch pushed upright into the dirt. Its blackened tip matched the one from beneath their bedroom floor. The cave dweller had not entered the village. It had found another way to reach the lights. That afternoon, the librarian brought Steve a second book. It had appeared on the same lectern as the first. Only one page contained writing. Jory used the surface 3 times. Steve read it twice. The sentence was not written in Jory's uneven hand. The letters were straight, deep, and cut through the paper as if made by a claw. Chapter 3. The Dwelling Beneath the Mountain. The Plan Beneath the Mountain. Alex believed the creature was tied to the square marked Dwelling on Jory's map. Destroying that place might stop it from appearing. Doing nothing meant waiting for the next light to die. Steve counted their escapes. The first had occurred before he understood what he saw. The second came after the distant sighting with Alex. The third ended the chase from Jory's camp. 3 uses of the surface. Jory had written that there would not be a fourth. They prepared as if the next descent would be their last. Alex built 4 bundles of TNT and a remote ignition line from redstone repeaters. Steve brewed potions of swiftness, strength, and instant health. They carried enchanted golden apples from a woodland mansion, fire resistance from the Nether, and 1 totem of undying each. Alex placed a lodestone compass in the village square so that any route upward would point home. Their best defense was a series of safe rooms. Every 40 blocks, they built a chamber with iron walls, piston doors, and no opening larger than a button. They installed redstone lamps instead of torches. The cave dweller could extinguish flame, but they had not seen it interfere with powered blocks. The first safe room worked, the second worked. At the third, every redstone lamp turned off as Steve entered. The levers were still powered. The redstone dust still glowed. The lamps simply refused to make light. From inside the wall came a slow scratching sound. Alex placed a torch. It burned blue. "It knows what we built," Steve said. "Then we do not stop again." They left the safe room and continued down. The grinning moth. At Y level -54, the stone changed. Veins of dark red blocks appeared between the deep slate, soft beneath Steve's pickaxe and faintly warm when broken. Small skulls lay in corners. None belonged to skeletons, Steve recognized. The air carried the sound of wet blocks being placed far away. A moth fluttered above the path. Its wings were pale, but the pattern across them formed 2 white eyes and a wide, tooth-filled mouth. Whenever Steve approached, it flew deeper into the cave. Alex remembered a line in Jory's second book, "Little face finds the big one." They followed. The moth led them through a dripstone cavern across an underground lake and into a maze of 1-block cracks. Steve had to crawl. Alex moved behind him, holding the compass between them. The needle no longer pointed toward Lantern Vale. It spun so quickly that the red tip became a circle. Halfway through the crawl space, something touched Steve's boot. He stopped. Alex was 1 block behind him. Both of her hands were visible. The touch came again from the darkness beyond her. Alex looked over her shoulder. Her torch went out. They crawled forward as the shaft filled with clicking joints. The dweller was following on its stomach. Its claws struck the walls in an irregular rhythm. Sometimes the sound was directly behind Alex. Sometimes it came from ahead of Steve, as if the same tunnel had folded around them. The shaft opened without warning. Steve fell into a chamber and lost 2 hearts. Alex landed beside him. The moth circled once above their heads, then flew into a wall of dark red tissue. The wall opened like an eye. Beyond it was the dwelling, the room that breathed. The dwelling occupied an entire underground chunk. Its walls were made from blocks that expanded and contracted in a slow rhythm. Bone pillars rose between them. Blackened torches had been pressed into the tissue by the hundreds. Along one wall stood pieces of Jory's camp, his furnace, the foot of his bed, and an iron block covered with scratches. At the centre was a pit descending to bedrock. White eyes watched from inside it. Not one pair, dozens. Steve stepped closer and realized they were not living eyes, they were objects embedded in the walls, pearls or eggs, each shaped like the dweller's gaze. Fine roots connected them to a single block suspended above the pit. It pulsed brighter whenever Steve moved. Alex opened a shulker box and placed TNT around the central structure. Steve laid the ignition line back toward the entrance. They worked without torches, using the faint white glow from the embedded eyes. The creature did not attack. It stood on the ceiling directly above them, translucent again, silently watching. Steve saw it first. He kept his head down and whispered to Alex, "Do not look up. Is it pale? Yes. Then it is still watching." They placed the final TNT. Alex connected the redstone line. When she reached for the lever, the cave dweller dropped between them. It became solid before its feet touched the floor. Steve found himself staring into its white eyes. Alex stood on the opposite side of the creature, one hand frozen above the lever. The dweller's mouth opened, but no roar came out. Instead, it made the sound of a pickaxe striking stone. 1 strike, a pause, 2 more strikes. The sound from beneath their bedroom. Steve understood then. It had been studying the noises that made them move, the bell, the mining, the footsteps. It did not imitate voices because it had not needed them yet. Alex wrapped her fingers around the lever. "On 3, she said. The creature's head snapped toward her. Steve attacked. His sword cut across its back. The dweller twisted with impossible speed and struck him into the pit. His totem of undying activated before he reached the bottom. Green light burst around him. The impact left half a heart. Above, Alex pulled the lever. The dwelling exploded. The broken compass. TNT tore through the chamber in a chain of white flashes. Bone pillars shattered. Tissue blocks burned. The suspended core dropped into the pit beside Steve and split open on the bedrock floor. Inside was a lodestone compass. Its needle pointed straight at Steve. He had no time to understand. The ceiling collapsed. Steve drank a healing potion, climbed the broken blocks, and found Alex near the entrance. Her helmet was gone. One arm of her armor had broken. Behind her, the cave dweller dragged itself from the fire. The explosion had changed it. Its pale skin was blackened, and half its mouth hung open. The white eyes burned brighter than before. It no longer paused to watch. it screamed. Every remaining torch in the mountain went out. Steve and Alex ran into the crawl space. The dweller struck the opening, then flattened itself and followed. It did not hesitate at the tight stone. It moved faster than they could crawl. Alex emptied her water bucket behind them. The current carried broken blocks toward the creature. It ignored them. Steve reached the end of the shaft and pulled Alex free. The dweller's hand closed around her boot. She removed it from her armor slot. The boot remained in the creature's claws while Alex escaped barefoot into the dripstone cave. The lodestone compass in Steve's inventory spun toward the pit, not the village. Jory's map burned in the blast. Their safe rooms were dark. The only route was memory. They sprinted west across the underground lake. A boat waited at the shore, placed there during their preparations. Alex pushed it into the water and climbed in. Steve sat behind her. For a moment, the boat gained distance. Then the cave dweller entered the lake. It did not swim. It ran along the bottom. White eyes followed beneath the boat, always one block behind. Its long arms reached through the water and struck the hull from below. Wood cracked. Alex rowed toward the far shore. The boat broke 3 blocks before land. They fell into black water. The thing beneath the lake. Steve surfaced alone. He called Alex's name. No answer came. Bubbles rose near the broken boat, followed by her shield. Steve dived. The lake was deeper than he remembered. His night vision potion had expired, but a pale glow moved across the bottom. The dweller stood below, one hand around Alex's ankle. She struck its face with a pickaxe while her air bubbles dwindled. Steve swam down and drove his sword into the creature's arm. It released her. Alex kicked toward the surface. The dweller turned to Steve. Underwater, its mouth opened far wider than it had on land. A cloud of black particles poured out. Steve's remaining air vanished instantly. He used an ender pearl. The pearl flew through the water and struck the shore. Steve teleported onto stone with one heart and began suffocating for another second before air returned. Alex crawled beside him. Behind them, the dweller rose from the lake without making a splash. They reached the dripstone cavern. Alex fired arrows at pointed stalactites, while Steve led the creature beneath them. Stone spikes fell and pinned the dweller to the floor. Its arms continued pulling. One claw wrapped around a stalagmite and dragged its body free, leaving pieces of skin behind. The delay gave Steve and Alex enough time to reach the abandoned mine shaft. The route divided at Jory's iron room. South led toward Steve's staircase. East led into unmapped tunnels. Steve turned south. Alex stopped. All 6 hearts she had left vanished from her display at once, then returned. Her totem of undying flashed green. The cave dweller was not behind them. It was inside the iron room, standing in the darkness beyond the piston door. It had taken a route through the 1-block hole in the ceiling and reached the junction first. It did not charge. It pointed east. The 4th escape. "It is blocking the way home," Alex said. The dweller lowered its hand. Steve threw a piece of cooked beef toward the southern passage. The creature's eyes followed it for half a second. Alex fired an arrow at the piston lever. The door slammed across the dweller's body, trapping one arm inside the iron room. They ran south. The arm stretched farther than it should have. Claws scraped the back of Steve's chest plate. Then the piston tore the limb free. The cave dweller screamed behind the closed door. They climbed. The mountain shook from the explosions below. Sections of staircase had collapsed. Steve built upward while Alex covered the tunnel. At Y level -12, she placed the last TNT bundle and connected it to a pressure plate. "That will bury the mine," she said. "It crawls through one block." "Then we do not leave it one." They crossed the plate and sprinted. The blast filled the staircase from wall to wall. Cobblestone, deep slate, and obsidian collapsed together. The shockwave threw them through the iron entrance and onto the snow. Late afternoon sunlight covered the mountain. The cave dweller emerged through the explosion, and it came on all fours, burning, one arm missing, pieces of deep slate lodged in its back. It crossed the line of daylight without slowing. Jory's warning had been correct. 3 escapes had taught it the boundary. The 4th had made the boundary meaningless. The dweller was enraged. It chased them down the mountain. Chapter 4. The Fall of Lantern Vale. The Fall of Lantern Vale. Steve and Alex reached the northern wall at sunset. The gate closed behind them. Villagers scattered into houses as the warning bell rang. The iron golem stepped into the road and lifted both arms. The cave dweller cleared the stone wall in one movement. It landed inside the village and struck the golem before the larger creature could swing. Iron flew across the square. The golem lost half its body against the library wall. It attacked again. The dweller climbed its chest, reached behind its head, and pulled until the iron cracked. Steve fired from the watchtower. Alex triggered dispensers built into the roofs. Arrows filled the square. The cave dweller moved between them, sometimes upright, sometimes crawling under market stalls, sometimes climbing the sides of houses without ladders. Every lantern it passed went dark. Villagers crowded into the church. Steve ordered the golems from the eastern farm released. 3 reached the square. The first was thrown into the well. The second landed one blow before the dweller crawled between its legs. The third never found a target. Darkness moved too quickly. Alex activated the water defense. Floodgates opened along the northern reservoir. A wall of water poured through the streets, carrying fences, crops, and loose blocks toward the river. Villagers remained safe on the upper floors. Steve and Alex climbed onto the blacksmith roof. The dweller walked against the flood. Water pressed its body flat, but its claws dug into the path. It advanced one block at a time. When the current became too strong, it climbed the outside of the blacksmith and pulled itself onto the roof beside them. Steve struck with his sword. Alex blocked the return blow. her shield shattered. They jumped into the flood and let it carry them toward the main house. Behind them, the dweller crossed the rooftops, extinguishing lanterns it never touched. They reached the bedroom and barricaded the door with obsidian. Steve opened the emergency chest. Inside were spare armor, food, rockets, and 2 elytra. Only 1 elytra remained. In its place lay Jory's cracked compass. The choice. Steve handed the elytra to Alex. She pushed it back. "You have the rockets," she said. "We both leave." "On what?" The obsidian wall trembled. A pale claw appeared beneath the door. The gap was less than half a block high. Alex opened the trapdoor to the attic. "There is another way." They climbed to the roof. The village below had become a dark grid, broken by moonlight and flood water. The church remained lit. The dweller had ignored it so far, choosing Steve and Alex instead of the villagers. Alex pointed toward the mountain. A narrow redstone line ran from the attic to the mine entrance. It connected to the TNT they had buried through the upper tunnels over months of excavation. "If the dwelling was tied to the mountain, we remove the mountain," she said. Steve understood the cost. The blast would destroy their mines, the northern wall, and perhaps half the village. It might also bury the creature beneath thousands of blocks. The roof moved beneath them. The cave dweller's head pushed through the spruce planks. It had crawled between the attic and the tiles. Its remaining arm seized Alex's ankle. Steve equipped the elytra. "Hold on to me." Alex struck the redstone control with her axe. The mountain detonated. For 1 second, the northern sky became white. Rows of TNT ignited through every branch, mine at once. Snow, stone, and deep slate rose above the valley in a vast, square cloud. The shockwave tore the roof from the house. Steve launched with a firework. Alex caught his wrist as the roof fell away. The cave dweller did not let go of Alex. All 3 were pulled into the air. The flight over the river. Steve fired a second rocket. The elytra climbed, but Alex and the creature dragged beneath him. The dweller's claws remained locked around her bootless ankle. Its body struck the side of the watchtower and broke through the upper platform without releasing her. Alex swung her pickaxe downward. The first strike hit its wrist. The second removed 2 claws. On the third, the creature opened its mouth and made a new sound. "Steve." It spoke in Alex's voice. Steve looked down. The cave dweller used the moment to climb. Its arm wrapped around Alex, its claws reached for Steve's elytra, and its white eyes stared into his. Alex removed the last piece of armor from her ankle. The boot slipped free. She and the dweller fell together. Steve turned the elytra downward. The river rushed toward him. Alex fell near the eastern bank. The creature twisted in the air, using its long arm to pull her closer. Steve fired his last rocket. He caught Alex 2 blocks above the water. They struck the river hard enough to remove most of their remaining hearts. The cave dweller landed on the opposite bank, folded beneath the impact, then slowly stood. Behind it, The mountain collapsed into itself. The northern half of Lantern Vale disappeared beneath stone. The library, gatehouse, and main square were buried. Only the church and eastern farms remained above the dust. The dweller looked at the falling mountain. For the first time, it seemed afraid. The ground split beneath its feet. A sinkhole opened from the destroyed mine to the valley floor. The creature fell into darkness as the river poured after it. Stone closed over the opening. Steve and Alex climbed onto the bank. The white eyes were gone. The count after dawn. Morning revealed what the explosion had done. Lantern Vale was no longer a valley. A wall of broken stone covered the north. The flood had destroyed the wheat fields. The main house was open to the sky. 3 iron golems lay motionless beneath the mud. Every villager inside the church survived. Steve and Alex spent the day searching the ruins. They found Flint beneath the gatehouse stairs, alive and trembling. They found the enchanted table in the river, 6 emeralds under a roof, and one of Jory's books impaled on a fence post. The page about the surface had changed. I used the sun 3 times. There will not be a 4th. Beneath it, a new sentence had appeared. There was a 4th. It followed me home. Steve closed the book. They listened for mining beneath the ruins. They watched the sinkhole. They placed bells around the river and rebuilt lanterns along the church road. Nothing moved below. No torch went out. For the next 12 days, Lantern Vale began again. Villagers cleared stone from their doors. Alex rebuilt the western farm. Steve sealed every visible cave with obsidian, even the shallow openings that contained nothing but coal. Flint returned to sleeping beneath the window of a temporary house. At night, the valley remained bright. On the 13th morning, Alex went to inspect the river bells and did not return. The missing blocks. Steve found her pickaxe beside the eastern bank. There were no dropped items, no experience orbs, and no sign of a fight. A line of missing grass blocks led from the river toward the birch forest. 1 block removed every 8 steps. Steve followed with Flint. The trail ended at a hill. A hole had been cut into its side, 1 block high and 1 block wide. Alex's helmet lay inside. Flint growled. From deep in the shaft came Alex's voice. Steve. The wolf stepped forward as Steve pulled him back. The voice called again. It was exact in tone, but wrong in rhythm, broken into pieces recorded at different moments. Steve, hold on. There is another way. Words from the attack. Words the creature had heard. Steve placed TNT at the opening. Before he could light it, a crossbow bolt flew out of the dark and struck the dirt beside him. Alex crawled from the shaft. Her armor was gone. 1 arm was bleeding, and she had 3 arrows left. Steve nearly attacked before he saw her green eyes. It took the long route, she said. It came up beneath the forest. Behind her, 2 white squares opened in the dark. Steve lit the TNT. he and Alex ran as the hill collapsed. The explosion buried the hole. From somewhere beneath their feet, the cave dweller began to laugh in Steve's voice, leaving the valley. They understood that Lantern Vale could not be defended. The creature no longer needed the mountain or the dwelling. Destroying its home had not destroyed it. The pulsing chamber may have been a nest, a prison, or the only thing that kept the cave dweller within one underground chunk. Whatever it was, Steve and Alex had removed it. They packed before sunset. The villagers would travel south to a plain settlement Steve had marked months earlier. Alex led them with the remaining golem. Steve stayed behind to draw the creature north. Alex objected until Steve showed her Jory's cracked compass. Since the mountain's collapse, the needle had stopped spinning. It pointed at Steve no matter which way he turned. The lodestone had never been in the village. The creature had marked him. "It will follow me," Steve said. "Then I follow you. The villagers need someone. It is not hunting." Alex looked toward the dark mountain. She gave Steve half the food, the remaining rockets, and her last potion of healing. Before dawn, she led the caravan south. Steve watched until the final lantern disappeared over the hills. Then he walked north alone. He crossed the birch forest, the frozen river, and a taiga where powdered snow covered hidden drops. He never entered a cave. He slept only in open fields. At every stop, he placed 4 torches around his bed and counted them before closing his eyes. On the first night, all 4 remained lit. On the second, the eastern torch went out. On the third, Steve woke to find every torch burning and a 1-block hole beneath his bed. He stopped sleeping. The last refuge. Steve travelled for 9 days until he reached an ocean. He built a boat and pushed away from shore, believing distance might accomplish what walls had not. By sunset, the taiga was a dark line behind him. No land waited ahead. At midnight, the boat struck something. Steve looked into the water. 2 white eyes moved beneath the hull. The cave dweller walked along the ocean floor. It followed without rising, visible whenever the moon crossed the waves. When Steve turned east, the eyes turned east. When he rowed faster, they kept pace. At dawn, they disappeared beneath deep water. But the boat continued to shudder from impacts below. Steve abandoned it at a mushroom island. No hostile mobs spawned there. Red mushrooms covered the hills. Mushrooms wandered without fear. For 2 hours, the island felt untouched. Then the shadow of a long arm moved beneath the mycelium. The cave dweller emerged from a 1-block hole beside the shore. Steve ran. The creature chased him in daylight across open ground without hiding or fading. It had lost most of its skin in the explosions. 1 arm was missing. Its body leaned to the side when it sprinted. It should have been weaker. It was faster. Steve used the elytra and his remaining rockets. He flew until the island vanished and landed on the roof of an ocean monument. Guardians fired through the water at the shape below. Beams struck it from every direction. The dweller climbed the monument walls and pulled itself onto the roof. Steve had one ender pearl left. He threw it toward the sea and vanished just before the creature's claws closed around him. The unfinished road. The pearl placed Steve on a strip of sand. He did not know the coordinates. His elytra was nearly broken. His food had fallen to 6 cooked potatoes. The cracked compass still pointed at his chest. He walked inland. Days passed without a village. At night, Steve heard the creature beneath the ground, matching his pace. If he stopped, it stopped. If he sprinted, claws moved faster through the stone. Sometimes the sound came from the left, sometimes from the right. It was opening tunnels around him, building a second road beneath the one he travelled. On the 5th day, Steve found a ruined portal. One obsidian block was missing. A chest beside it contained flint, steel, and exactly 1 piece of obsidian. He completed the frame. The Nether offered no safety, but it offered distance. Steve lit the portal and stepped into red light. He emerged in a basalt delta above a lava sea. Magma cubes jumped between black pillars. Ghasts cried in the distance. For the first time in days, the cracked compass needle pointed away from him. It turned back toward the portal. Steve almost laughed. Then one torch appeared on the basalt beside him. It was already burnt black. The portal rippled. A long, pale arm reached through. Steve broke the obsidian frame with his pickaxe before the body could follow. Purple light collapsed. The arm fell onto the basalt and dissolved into smoke. Silence returned. Steve remained in the Nether for 3 days. He traded gold with piglins, repaired his elytra with phantom membranes he still carried, and followed a fortress bridge until he was far from the broken portal. He built a second frame and calculated that the distance should place him thousands of blocks from Lantern Vale. When he returned to the overworld, he stood in a desert beneath the noon sun. No white eyes waited. The compass needle was still. The story in the sand. Steve built a small shelter on a sandstone ridge. He did not mine beneath it. He did not place a bed. He watched the horizon until sunset and kept every torch within sight. Nothing approached. At midnight he opened Alex's last written book. She had slipped it into his pack before leaving the valley. Most of it contained coordinates for the village's southern route. On the final page, she had written a message. If it follows you, keep moving. If it stops following, do not assume it is gone. It may have found a shorter path. Steve looked at the cracked compass. The needle moved. It pointed south, not at Steve, not at the broken portal. South, toward the direction Alex had taken, the villagers. The creature had not followed him through the Nether. It had learned where he wanted it not to go. Steve launched from the ridge before dawn. He had enough rockets for one long flight. He crossed the desert, a savanna, and miles of dark forest. When the rockets ended, he continued on foot. The compass needle remained fixed south. At sunset, It began to shake. One message appeared in the book beneath Alex's final line. The ink formed while Steve watched. Found the lights. Steve ran through the night. The road back? It took Steve 4 days to reach the plain settlement. He expected broken doors and dark houses. Instead, he found the villagers alive. Lanterns burned along a new wall. Flint slept beside the gate. Alex stood on the watchtower with a crossbow aimed at him until she recognized the blue shirt beneath his damaged armor. The reunion lasted less than a minute. Steve showed her the book. Alex showed him the mine beneath the settlement. The villagers had discovered it while expanding a cellar. It was 1 block high, perfectly straight and pointed north. They had filled it with stone. Every morning, the stone was gone. At the end of the tunnel, they found a chamber containing objects from Lantern Vale, the library lectern, 1 iron golem poppy, Steve's missing elytra, and the central block from the dwelling. The block had survived the explosion. It pulsed whenever Steve touched the compass. The cave dweller had not followed Alex to the settlement. It had sent its roots ahead of her. The tunnel, the books, and the compass were parts of the same system. Wherever the marked survivor travelled, the dwelling could begin again beneath him. Alex wanted to destroy the core with lava. Steve stopped her. They had already destroyed it once. The creature had become stronger. Fire, TNT, water, iron, and daylight had each taught it something new. This time, they would teach it nothing. They sealed the chamber and evacuated before sunset. The final watch. The villagers travelled east while Steve and Alex remained at the empty settlement. They removed every torch and lantern from the streets. They emptied the chests, opened the doors, and left no trap for the creature to study. The town became completely dark. Steve stood in the square. Alex waited on a hill beyond the wall with the villagers, far enough that the cave dweller would not see her. If it followed Steve, she would lead everyone farther east. If it ignored him, she would know the mark had moved. At midnight, a cave sound rolled beneath the settlement. The ground opened beside the well. The cave dweller climbed out. Its missing arm had grown back, longer than before. Dark red roots covered its body. White eyes shone from its face, shoulders, and chest. It no longer resembled the pale watcher Steve had first seen at the bend in his mine. It looked like the dwelling had learned to walk. The creature saw Steve. It did not attack. It became translucent and stood at the edge of the square. The stalking had begun again. Steve understood the cycle, watching, waiting, hunting. Rage did not replace the stages. Rage only removed the places where they ended. He walked north through the open gate. The cave dweller followed at a distance. Steve did not use a boat. He did not enter water. He did not fly, build, attack, hide, or turn toward the hill where Alex watched. Every defense had become a lesson. Every escape had become permission. He simply walked. At dawn, the creature was still behind him, pale in the sunlight. At noon, it moved closer. By sunset, Steve could hear its claws touch the grass between his footsteps. He reached a ravine after dark. The land ended without warning, splitting into a drop so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Steve stopped at the edge. The cave dweller stopped behind him. For the first time since leaving the settlement, Steve turned. The creature had become solid. It stood 1 block away, head bent, mouth closed, white eyes fixed on his face. The standoff. Looking away would begin the chase. Moving closer would do the same. Steve could not retreat without entering the ravine. Behind the creature, far across the plains, 1 lantern appeared on a hill. Alex's signal. The villagers were safe. The mark had remained with Steve. He held the cave dweller's gaze until the lantern vanished beyond the horizon. Then Steve stepped backward into the ravine. The creature lunged. Steve caught the cliff with a water bucket, fell through the stream, and entered a cave halfway down. He collected the water behind him. Darkness closed over the opening. The cave dweller crawled down the ravine wall. Steve ran deeper, past iron he did not mine and diamonds he did not touch. 1 by 1 the torches in his pack lit the way. 1 by 1 something behind him put them out. The chase continued beneath a world with no village left to threaten and no home left to lose. Steve was alive. Alex was alive. The others were far ahead, carrying Lantern Vale's final light toward a new horizon. So Steve kept moving through the stone, listening to the claws behind him and watching for another way upward. Far ahead, at the end of the cave, 2 white eyes opened. Steve stopped. The claws behind him stopped too. Then the last torch went out.